The forest was old. It was a place where the trees grew close together. Their leaves formed a thick green roof high above the ground. Little sunlight reached the forest floor. A fine mist always seemed to hang in the air. It clung to the branches of the trees and made the world feel quiet and damp. A narrow path, made of red mud, twisted through the trees. It was the only way in or out. The path led to a clearing. In the center of this clearing stood an old house. It was a house that seemed to have grown from the earth itself, a forgotten relic of a time long past. The house was built in the old Mangalore style. Its walls were made of dark, weathered bricks. Moss grew in the cracks between them, painting green lines across the surface. The roof was covered with red mud tiles, curved and heavy. Many were broken or missing, leaving dark gaps that looked like missing teeth. The house had a low, sprawling look. It seemed to hug the ground, as if afraid of the tall trees that surrounded it. A single wooden door, dark with age and rain, stood as the only entrance. It looked heavy and unwelcoming, a silent guardian to the secrets held within its walls. Rohan and Priya arrived on a cloudy afternoon. The air was cool and smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. They stood for a moment, looking at their new home. It was exactly what they had wanted, a quiet place, far from the noise of the city. The house looked a little lonely, a little sad, but they were not afraid. They were young and full of hope. Rohan pushed the heavy door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the stillness of the forest. They stepped inside, their footsteps soft on the cool stone floor. The air inside was musty and cold, carrying the scent of dust and damp wood. They began to explore the house, room by room. The layout was strange and beautiful. Every room, whether it was the small kitchen or the spacious bedroom, opened onto a central courtyard. It was an open space in the middle of the house, letting in the grey light from the sky. There were no windows facing the outside forest, only doorways and arches that looked inward. It felt like the house was designed to look at itself, to keep its focus away from the dense, watching woods. The design was meant to bring nature inside, but instead it felt as if it were trapping something within its walls. In the centre of the courtyard was the pond. It was not a small decorative pool. It was a large, deep body of water, built like a well. Its stone walls were old and covered in a thick layer of green moss that dripped constantly into the water. The pond was the heart of the house. From any room you could see its dark, unmoving surface. It reflected the grey sky above like a polished black mirror. There were no ripples, no signs of life. The water was perfectly still, and its silence was profound. It seemed to be waiting for something, holding its breath in the quiet air of the courtyard. Rohan walked to the edge of the pond. He leaned over, trying to see the bottom. The water was so dark and murky that he could see nothing but his own faint reflection looking back at him. A strange feeling washed over him, a sense of unease that he could not explain. The water seemed ancient and deep, as if it connected to some other, darker place. He felt a strange pull, a gentle but persistent invitation to step into its cool embrace. He imagined the water would be icy cold, a shock to the system, a cold that would seep right into his bones and stay there forever. Priya joined him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the silence. But her eyes held a different story. She too felt the strangeness of the pond. It was the centerpiece of their new life, yet it felt like a void. It was a place of quiet beauty, but also of deep, unsettling mystery. They had dreamed of a home with a courtyard and a garden, a place of life and growth. This pond, however, felt like the opposite. It was a place of stillness, of darkness, where nothing seemed to live or grow. The couple decided to clean the house before unpacking their belongings. As Rohan swept the dusty floors of the main hall, His gaze kept returning to the pond. The water remained perfectly undisturbed, a dark eye staring up at the sky. He found it hard to look away. The silence of the water was more powerful than any sound. It seemed to absorb all the noise from the house, pulling it into its depths. Even the creak of the floorboards and the rustle of their movements seemed to vanish as they reached the edge of the courtyard, swallowed by the profound and unnerving quiet of the pond. Later that evening, as the light began to fade, Priya was in the kitchen. She glanced out at the pond, and for the first time she saw something move. It was not a fish. It was not a ripple from the wind. It was a long, dark shape, like a thick strand of algae. It moved just beneath the surface of the water with a slow, deliberate motion. It looked like a snake, coiling and uncoiling in the murky depths. It was a dark green, almost black, and it seemed to absorb the little light that reached it. She watched, her heart beating a little faster, as the shape glided silently through the water, leaving no wake behind it. She called out to Rohan. He came and stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the pond. He saw it too. The strange, snake-like algae was moving with an unnatural grace. It was not drifting with a current. It seemed to be alive, exploring its silent kingdom. The creature was long, perhaps 10 feet or more, and it moved with a purpose that was both fascinating and terrifying. They watched for a long time as the shadow swam in slow circles, its form sometimes clear, sometimes fading into the darkness of the pond. It was a secret inhabitant of their new home, a life form they had never imagined. The next day, Rohan decided he had to investigate. The mystery of the pond was too strong to ignore. He thought perhaps it was just an unusual type of aquatic plant, caught in a strange current. He told Priya he was just going to step onto the first stone step to get a closer look. He rolled up his trousers, his bare feet touching the cold, mossy stone at the pond's edge. He hesitated for a moment, the dark water looking back at him without a stir. The snake-like algae was nowhere to be seen. The pond was as still and silent as it had been when they first arrived. He took a careful step onto the submerged stone ledge just below the surface. The water was colder than he had imagined, a biting cold that shot up his leg. The moment his foot was fully submerged, the dark shape appeared from the depths. It moved with impossible speed. Before Rohan could even cry out, the algae-like creature wrapped itself around his ankle. It was not slimy like a plant. It was strong and firm like a thick, muscular rope. It tightened its grip and he felt a powerful pull, dragging him off the step and into the deeper water. Rohan gasped as the cold water closed over his head. Panic seized him. He thrashed and kicked, but the creature's grip was unbreakable. It pulled him down, deeper and deeper into the blackness of the pond. He opened his eyes, but could see nothing but suffocating darkness. The creature was growing. As it pulled him down, it seemed to expand, its single strand multiplying into a thick, writhing mass. It wrapped around his legs, his waist, his chest, constricting him like a giant serpent. He felt his strength leaving him, the air in his lungs burning. From the edge of the pond, Priya watched in horror. She saw Rohan disappear beneath the surface. For a moment, there was a violent churning of the water. Then it grew still again. But the water was no longer clear enough to see the shadow. It had become a swirling vortex of green and black. She could feel, more than see, the monstrous thing growing larger in the depths, feeding on the life it had captured. The creature was swallowing him whole, absorbing him into its own being. The pond was no longer just a body of water. It was a living, hungry entity. A terrible silence fell over the courtyard. The water returned to its placid state, a perfect dark mirror reflecting the grey sky. There was no sign of Rohan, no trace of the struggle. It was as if he had never been there at all. Priya stood frozen, her mind unable to process what she had just witnessed. The beautiful, mysterious pond was a tomb. The house was not a home. It was a cage built around a predator that waited patiently in the dark. She backed away slowly, her eyes wide with terror, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sun set and darkness claimed the forest. Priya was gone, having fled into the misty woods, her fate unknown. The old Mangalore house stood empty once more, its secrets safe within its walls. The only sounds were those of the forest at night, the chirp of a cricket, the distant hoot of an owl. A cold wind began to blow. It moved through the trees, making them whisper to one another. It found its way into the house through the broken tiles on the roof, creating a low, mournful whistle that echoed through the empty rooms and across the still, dark water of the pond.